our whole mission is based on more transparency and more accountability in the legislature. Everybody talks about these two things, but unfortunately we haven't seen too much of it recently, and we think that because of the difficult fiscal times that we're facing and some of the other programs with some of the other troubled agencies and projects, more so than ever before, we need transparency. So that's what we're going to provide to you. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the 5 major project areas that we're going to be concentrating on this year. And basically those areas are, number 1, economic diversification and budget reduction. Number 2, education reform, involving both the Department of Education, the University of Hawaii. Number 3 is health-related issues. I just came upstairs from the preliminary budget hearing on the Hawaii Health Connector, and right after this conference I'll go back down for the Department of Health. But we'll be talking about the ACA and also the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation. Number 4 is much needed Public Utilities Commission reform. We've already been involved in that, and we'll have some comments on some of the things, and in particular the planned Hawaiian Electric merger, which Ms. Higa has already started doing analysis on. And then finally, most important to all of our residents, even though the past administration and others continue to talk about how we've turned the corner and things have gotten better, we in the Senate minority did not accept it before. We don't accept it now. While there are certain pockets of economic success, and we laud that, most of the people in our community are suffering. Most small businesses are suffering. They are suffering under the weight of a tremendous tax and regulatory burden. And so we're looking for constantly things to do to alleviate those problems, and we'll discuss that also in terms of reform of the Jones Act. And then we'll talk to you very briefly about some of the additional bills and legislation that we'll be proposing this year, and we'll certainly welcome your questions. But to start this off, let's talk about the budget, our alternative budget, and some of the fiscal issues, and I'd like to ask Paul Harleman, our budget director, to come up and talk to you for a few minutes. Paul?
Thank you, Senator Slom. Well, economic diversification and budget reductions are 2 key priorities for the Senate minority this year. With the passing of Senator Inouye and the current pressure on federal spending, the need to diversify Hawaii's economy has never been greater. We at the Senate minority believe that the state's economy cannot diversify without a reduction in government spending and taxation. Hawaii currently ranks at the bottom of most national business studies, and in order to diversify our economy, we have to create a business environment that welcomes new businesses and industries. The best way to do that is through corporate income tax reform. In Hawaii, corporate income taxes account for less than 2% of the state's general fund revenues and are therefore not a significant source of income for the state. Corporate income taxes are, however, a big burden for corporations in our state. The Senate minority is therefore introducing a bill to eliminate the corporate income tax. This bill accomplishes 2 key objectives. Number 1, it reduces the cost of doing business in Hawaii, and it allows businesses to invest in expansion as opposed to subsidizing our state government. Number 2, it attracts new business investment. Eliminating the corporate income tax is a necessary step to improve our business climate and to grow our economy. As of now, I'd like to introduce Office Manager and Chief of Staff Kim Kettner, who will cover some of our other initiatives.
Thank you, Paul. Well, following the lines of the Senate minority's focus on transparency, accountability, and lowering the cost of living for Hawaii residents, in this legislative session, We'll be introducing bills to encourage accountability within the Department of Education and the University of Hawaii. We will be requesting financial, managerial, and program audits of both organizations. The opinion of the Senate minority is that no additional taxpayer money should be spent on the athletic program until it demonstrates fiscal responsibility. With regard to lowering the cost of living for Hawaii residents, we will be introducing a resolution to exempt the non-contiguous trades of Hawaii, Alaska, and Puerto Rico from the U.S. build requirement in the Merchant Marine Act of 1920, also known as the Jones Act. This would serve to increase the competition among the carriers that serve these ports and help to reduce the cost of shipping. When the shipping costs are reduced, the cost of goods decline, and the savings will be passed on to Hawaii businesses and consumers. This relates to energy costs as well. As the state is able to import fuel at lower rates, the savings will be passed on to the consumers. I'll now turn it over to Kathy Higa, our legislative aide who is covering healthcare and energy.
Thank you, Kim. What I would have said Monday about the PUC and Hawaiian Electric has substantially changed as a consequence of new news that I'm sure you're aware of. What I can say today is that the opportunity for new leadership also creates an opportunity for much needed change that in this year in particular with the planned merger of Hawaiian Electric and NextEra is really critical to ensuring transparency and disclosure to the public of a deal that by any stretch of the imagination will be landmark and significant in this state. In keeping with Senator Slom's agenda of transparency, I think what we would ask for with the restructuring of the PUC or with the hiring of new leadership in the PUC is that transparency in particular in this year be key and paramount among their goals. With the Hawaii Health Connector, it actually touches on a subject near and dear to my heart because it's both about health as well as about technology. We continue, even with growing enrollments, to be second lowest in enrollments among state-based exchanges and toward the bottom of all states, both federal and state-based, making us the highest per capita cost per enrollee still today in the country. It leads us to have to ask whether the 2017 exemption is something that we should seriously consider beginning in this legislature when we're aware, as of their most formal, current formal annual report, that there'll be a request for as much as $28 million. And I think based on historic, models for programs similar to this, we can only expect that number to increase as time marches forward. So those will be the things that we'll be monitoring this year on those two fronts. I'd like to introduce Timothy Sutton, who is an attorney in the Senate Minority Research Office.
Aloha and good morning. My name is Tim Sutton. I'm a research attorney downstairs at the Senate Minority Research Office, and I'm thanking you all for coming today and take this moment to highlight some of the initiatives for our 2015 legislative package that were not already discussed or addressed by my colleagues. First, we're really proud to announce that we're rededicating our commitment to keeping our officials and our public officials and elected officers accountable for their actions by reinstituting bills for term limits, for recall, and for referendum to encourage greater public participation in the governing process. Second, we wanted to make sure that we attended to the rights and the needs of those most vulnerable in our society, namely our keiki and our kupuna. We're reintroducing our version of Kaylee's and Jessica's laws. We also have a bill that is set to give priority calendaring to any case being held in court that has a child victim or a child witness so that we can have less impact on the minor testifying and greater protection for those victims. And for our kupuna, we're going to reinstitute a bill that encourages civil defense to initiate a silver alert, which would help us find and relocate as expeditiously as possible any missing or displaced seniors in the community. And finally, the Senate minority wants to support the people's choice, which has been to create a school scholarship voucher program granting families the choice to seek a school setting that serves the best interests of the child's educational needs. We thank you all for joining us for this overview of our upcoming legislation for 2015. I'll return you to Senator Slom.
Just a couple of additional remarks. Paul, of course, will introduce again an alternative state operating budget. We've done this now for 4 years. It goes online. It is fully vetted. And the difference between our state budget and that proposed by the majority in the legislature is that it goes in a different direction. We don't believe that we can continue to have increases in spending and debt, and so we've found ways of cutting what we consider to be programs that are questionable or can't be defended, and we want to reduce that spending and leave more money in the pockets of individuals. Paul also attends the meetings of the Council of Revenues, and while they did up their estimate by 1%, that by no means will cover all of the problems that the state faces. Paul and the minority also introduced last week a paper on the general excise tax and on the general fund, and you're welcome if you did not get a copy of that. Maria will make sure that you do. On the area of education, one of our staff members, Elise Anderson, is investigating education by continuing her education at the University of Hawaii, and that's where she is right now. But we will continue to ask the tough questions. It seems that the DOE and the UH, my alma mater, have gotten passes in the past. And I expect that during the actual Ways and Means hearings that there will be tough questions. More importantly, the Senate minority is going to demand that we have answers. We can't keep having deficits. We can't keep having programs that just simply ask for more money and don't have results. In the area of the Health Connector, as I mentioned, I just came from the budget hearing downstairs. You know that we have a new director for the Health Connector. We have a new director for the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation, the HHSC. I mentioned at the outset that we will be more bipartisan and more collaborative with other individuals within the state Senate, and I can announce that we will be supporting a bill and co-introducing a bill from Senator Lorraine Inoue, which is going to call for a complete audit of the Hawaii Health Systems Corporation. Their answers this morning leave much to be desired. All we're faced with are continuing deficits, no changes in what they do, no better management or efficiency. We're also calling for election reforms and changes in the Office of Elections and the Chief Elections Officer, and we will be partnering with Senator Russell Ruderman to co-introduce legislation with those reforms. In terms of firearms, safety, and education, and registration, we will be teaming with Senator Mike Gabbard and having joint bills in that area. And then finally, in public safety, there's been a great concern about the oversight or lack thereof with our law enforcement agencies, so we'll be partnering with Senator Espero in public safety to co-sponsor certain pieces of legislation. The main thing is, as I said, we want to have transparency, we want to have accountability, and we want there to be consequences for bad government action. I think the public is really fed up when they keep hearing about stories of people gaming the system, or elected officials not doing their job, or agencies not following their mission. We are going to be more doggedly involved in that this year. We've waited for our colleagues, hoped our colleagues would make those changes. Unfortunately, they have not come, so we will be doing a lot of these things. At this time, I'd like